Working. I think we're going to begin. So it's rainy and cold outside. It's not too cold, but it's still kind of rainy, and it's definitely been a rainy day that has complicated things. And we lost our warm-up band of singers. The East Coast Inspirational Singers are going to make it, I hope, back to St. Anne's at some point. And you're all invited. I'll be sure to let you know when they come. And I am sorry, but it made sense for them. We are blessed, though, to be together for this book talk. And I'm happy to welcome anyone who's joining us online this evening. I want to say how glad from the outset I am to partner for St. Anne and the Holy Trinity Church to partner with the Brooklyn Book Festival. We've done a number of things, and this is part of their to-do this week and through the weekend. I have a few more things to say, but I'll speed through what I've prepared. At St. Anne and the Holy Trinity, we say that we stand at the intersection of faith and culture here on the corner of Clinton and Montague Streets in Brooklyn Heights. This is holy ground because for almost 2 centuries, something like 177 years, people have come to pray and learn and grow spiritually in this space, and also to lay their pain and hurt and confusion at the feet of God, and to entrust it to one another. As participants in this 2023 Brooklyn Book Festival bookend event, and this being one half of a 2-day program that we are co-hosting with our neighbors at Grace Church, called Spirit and Flesh, Our Bodies, Our Blackness, Ourselves. As participants here, Cole Arthur Riley and Tracey Michelle Lewis-Giggetts are now folded into a sacred circle, an extended family, I would say, a community of worshipers, performers, artists, and activists, and authors here. So I want to introduce those of you gathered and those of you joining us online to our guests who will engage in a conversation you're hopeful to hear soon. Cole Arthur Riley is a writer and poet. She is the author of the New York Times bestseller, This Here Flesh, Spirituality, Liberation, and the Stories That Make Us. Her writing has been featured in The Atlantic, Guernica, and The Washington Post, among others, other periodicals and magazines. Cole is also the creator and writer of Black Liturgies, a project that integrates spiritual practice with Black emotion, Black literature, and the Black body. As a writer and thought leader, Tracey Michelle Lewis-Giggetts offers those who read her work and hear her speak an authentic experience, an opportunity to explore the intersection of culture, identity, faith, and spirituality at the deepest levels. Tracey has published 22 books, including several collaborations with numerous high-profile authors. Her critically acclaimed book, Black Joy, Stories of Resistance, Resilience, and Restoration, won the 2023 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work and Instruction. Her latest book, Then They Came for Mine, Healing from the Trauma of Racial Violence, won the 2023 Wilbur Award for Excellence in Religious Writing in the Public Sector. Before I say more about these women, I want to acknowledge my colleagues with whom I have collaborated on this event and this weekend's program. We frankly would not be here if it were not for the Reverend Leandra Lambert, an associate priest at Grace Church, who recommended that our local clergy group read Cole's book this spring. And if not for my colleague, the associate here at St. Anne's, the Reverend Elise Hanley, who suggested that maybe Cole does public events, that led us to an invitation. And as you can see, one that Cole embraced. And if not for my friend, the rector of Grace Church, the Reverend Alan Robinson, who, when I asked if he'd be interested in joining forces to bring Cole to Brooklyn Heights, said yes before I finished the question. I must add that when Tracey was suggested as a conversation partner in this book talk, Cole said yes immediately. You two good people, a gifted poet, among other things, Cole, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, Tracey, you a gifted preacher, because you really preach in your writing. You represent the best, certainly, of what the church needs, and I'll say what the world needs too. Cole, your book has become one of my primary prayer aids. I mean it. You're my prayer partner. I'm just getting to tell you, and I'm very grateful to tell you in person. And Tracey, your own deep insights and the echoes of Cole's in your writing make it crystal clear why Cole was excited to join you in this conversation tonight. I think both of your work holds up a mirror to all of us, showing us the worst of ourselves and the best we can be. I grew up in the Bronx, listening to one or the other local R&B station, wanting to be any one of the disco divas whose songs I was belting out along with them, and whose music convinced me that God had to be a black woman. I know that sounds flip, but I kind of mean it. Since then, and particularly recently, I've gotten clearer about what it means to be black in America, and also got clear that I will never know what it is to be black in our country or anywhere. That I cannot know the experience of having a black body inhabiting a black soul, struggling and striving to claim black joy. Cole and Tracey, I am immensely grateful for the privilege to stand here and welcome you on behalf of the people of St. Anne and the Holy Trinity Church to this sanctuary for what I know will be a holy conversation, and with our friends at Grace Church to welcome you to Brooklyn Heights. It is now time for me to stop talking and to turn this over to you and to sit at your feet and to listen. And as I do turn this over to you, I ask all of you gathered here with me to please give it up for Cole Arthur Riley and Tracey Michelle Lewis-Giggetts. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that amazing welcome and introduction. Hi, Cole.
Hi.
I am just overjoyed to be here, to be in conversation with you. There's so much. I have like 1,000 questions, but I know we don't have time. It won't be 1,000. But I really am just looking forward to talking with you. And I know we had said that we're actually going to read a little bit on the onset in the beginning to kind of just lay the foundation of what we're going to talk about. So, me first, or you? Me?
I'll go first, and I'll say thank you for being here. Just trying to make sure my mic is somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I wasn't sure if it was just going to be Tracey and I, which if it were, I was going to be okay with that. But I'm grateful for everyone breathing the elements to be here, and this feels very intimate and lovely. I'll read first. This is from chapter 3 on wonder. Can I have my mic a little louder?
Okay, yeah, I could.
Do I need to do something to turn it up? It says on.
Yeah.
Um, I will try my best to project. Okay. Oh, yeah, there I am.
There you go.
I have a very naturally soft voice, and so this is a big relief to me. I'm going to read from the chapter on wonder and stop when people begin to look bored.
Never that. Never.
I have holes in my eyes. About a year ago, a doctor said it as plain as that. You know about the holes. I did not. Apparently, they are not uncommon, but I have enough of them that the doctors are all concerned. I am concerned. No one wants to think of decay in themselves. There I lay, scratchy grass and soft earth wriggling around my little body as I looked up at the sky. Slow and chubby, there wasn't a game of tag I could keep up in. In the middle of the game, I would lurch over to the other side of the yard and collapse like a dead thing as other kids ran around me, skipping over my motionless limbs. My eyelids would come awake slowly, finding the sky as I was resurrected, and I look up and just stare. Then one day I learned to move my eyes in and out of focus. As I did so, it felt like I was witnessing a mask ripped from the cosmos. In focus, clouds in blue, perfectly beautiful and ordinary. Out of focus, hundreds of minuscule, clear floating bubbles suspended in the space between. I thought I was seeing air. I wrestled my sister to the ground. Look, there. She squirmed and squinted. Tell me you see the air, I said. She did not, which made me think I had special powers, and maybe I did. I try not to let the knowledge of my eye holes steal this magic now. For in actuality, I was simply seeing my own eye, floaters and shadows and flashes of light. It was still beauty to me, now a solemn magic. Some wonders have a way of holding us, even in the deterioration of our present world. We must protect this. Have you ever watched a 3-year-old blow the wisps off of a dandelion for the first time? Children are made of awe. We have much to learn from them, but we seldom aim to. When we encounter the freedom of a child, we can choose to participate in their liberation, or we can grow to resent the freedom in them. The words childish and juvenile are made derogatory as we become overly concerned with the serious. It is a feigned superiority. The tragedy is, that as we distance ourselves from the delight of our youth, we become increasingly prone to disillusionment. Wonder and beauty are not precise cures for disillusionment, but they certainly can stave off the despair of it. To reclaim the awe of our child selves, to allow ourselves to be taken by the beauty of the thing, allows goodness to take up the space it's often denied in our interior worlds.
Thank you. I'm going to read from Then They Came for Mine. It's from the first chapter. What they don't tell you about this kind of grief, the kind born from inexplicable and unforeseeable violence, is that it consumes you. It grows roots in you, grounding itself into your being and bearing blue fruit. Everything you say and do and feel is tinged and tainted with its presence. It is a shape-shifting thing, contorting and distorting itself to fit the shape and state of your soul. There's no time to breathe the way you should because the waves crash too fast. There's no time to right yourself before another overwhelms you. There's no way to anticipate the storm when it suddenly moves in. You are viciously smacked around inside by the realization that because of the skin you're in, you are not safe. You are steeped in the awareness that one day you could be sitting in your home, drinking your tea, and thinking of ways to serve your sick mother. You could land on making her a meal and dropping off the platter to her nursing home room. You know it will brighten her day, and you live to do just that. You could run to the Kroger grocery store around the corner to maybe pick up some cabbage because you know that she loves cabbage, and you know how to make it just the way she likes it, fried with onions and whatnot. But there is something else. You could learn that you've won a murderous lottery. You could learn that you are the wrong color to be grocery shopping that day. You could find out that a white man with a gun has decided that today would be the day that you see the glory you always sang about in the choir. He has decided that you and another, a grandparent just like you, would have to pay for whatever is broken inside of him. You could pay with your life. And I imagine that you could lie there on the ground next to your car, holding nothing but your trust in that glory beyond as he stands over you. And you could hope that your mother and sons, your grandbabies and godchildren, your sisters and friends, and maybe even your little cousin who writes and writes and writes to exorcise the pain could eventually be all right. We are not. They don't tell you that this kind of grief feels graceless. It attaches itself to other traumas and trials and complicates things. It devours any ridiculous notion of safe spaces, and there are good people in this world, and not all white men. This particular kind of grief, born from the insanity of racial violence, plays dodgeball with your spirit, and no matter how quickly you move, how much you try to outthink it, it lands its hit every time. You're out, it announces to everyone around you before moving on to the next. And you are, out. In that moment, when you are hit, you sit out until a new game starts. A new day with new mercies comes, and you can try again. As Solange sang, you can't dance it away, sex it away, drink it away, work this kind of grief away. You can't look up dream houses on Zillow it away. You can't even write it away, though you will try. Oh, you will certainly try.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to talk to you because I feel like, and we were just talking over there, how there are so many points of connection and synergies between our work. And there's like our books are in conversation with each other. And one of the things that I love about your work, Black Liturgies, and your book is that you have talked about this idea of like collective grief. and also the ways in which we are resilient and we choose joy in spite of. And especially in my work in Black Joy, I talk about this idea of locating joy in the body, so that when the rage and the grief is so big, especially for those of us with Black and brown skin, you can call up joy. So I think my first question I want to, ask is, Cole, what does joy feel like in your body?
It's a good question, and one that my therapist would love. Have you been speaking to her? I've never been a particularly excitable person, or identify deeply with kind of an emotion of happiness or what other people would perceive as joy. I have what my friends call resting sad face.
Resting
They
sad.
see me and
Wow.
they think, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. And so I've had to, for a long time, I felt like joy was actually this alienating force in my life. My family is so excitable, so happy, so just naturally they translate their joy to the exterior world. And I've always struggled with that. And it took a long time for me to kind of become comfortable with a kind of joy that exists more on the plane of tranquility and peace. So when you ask me what it feels like in my body, it maybe feels like, my heart isn't beating as fast, and my neck isn't as hot, and there's kind of this inner stability, this inner stillness, and connection, this bridge between my interior world and the physical world, as opposed to this isolation.
I love that. I think my therapist would actually say, and we've actually had to talk about, it's interesting that you say it's like peace and like tranquility and stillness, because I think I often have confused joy with anxiety.
Yeah.
And my, therapist helped me, because I get like warm and I get excitable. As you said, I get really, I have this particular laugh. I will not do it here, but I have like this particular laugh that I do in my house that when anybody in my house hears it, they're like, ooh, mommy's watching her show. Or, like there's something that's happening, but I also get that same feeling when I'm anxious. And so I've had to divvy out what is excitement and what is anxiety for me. But I'm wondering, like, how do you reconcile then peace and tranquility and stillness, which is how joy shows up for you, with grief and with collective grief, like the big grief, and the personal?
Yeah, I think there's something about that stillness makes it so that grief can coexist with joy in my body, where for me, grief can be this kind of slowing force. And like you said, mistaking joy for this excitable force is what makes them feel so in conflict with each other. But when I realize that I actually can be slow and still access joy, it leaves room for grief. And I think about joy as kind of, at least in this season, ask me again in 5 years, but in this season I think of joy as kind of a landscape that can hold all of these different emotional experiences, like grief or lament or rage, I think, even, and that it allows these other emotions to participate without being consumed by any one of them, or at least that's how it is for me. If it's not operating in some kind of landscape together, I'll just be it will be quicksand. Any attempt at grief will be kind of an interior quicksand to me, and joy is kind of that tether that says you can feel and not be consumed. You don't have to look happy. You don't have to be excited. But it kind of has a refusal to surrender you to any other emotional state.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I don't even think I've thought of it that way. I think, okay, so now I'm going to be sitting with this forever, because I think for me, well, I guess maybe it's similar. I see joy as kind of coexisting with my grief and my rage, but for the longest time, it was very small. Like I didn't give myself permission to experience joy. I wasn't intentional about creating joy. So my grief and rage took up all of the space in my body, and it manifested itself physically in my body. So when I began to access joy, create joy, it became bigger, and it allowed for more balance, I guess, and more harmony. And the more expansive the joy came, it didn't take away the grief and rage, but it allowed for me to go to a place when I felt overwhelmed by the other emotions. But I'm hearing you now, and I'm thinking, like, what if joy is the thing that's tethering everything? Like what?
Maybe. I want to read you your own words. You wrote, "Black joy without understanding of empathy and self-compassion is simply black happiness, temporary at best." And I have this is not the only place I have this written down. It's also on one of these cards.
Oh my goodness.
And one of my journals. And I resonate with that because I think, in reading Black Joy, I think you've, well, I'll say this, like, Black joy as a concept is, like, very hot right now. Like, it's very in,
It is, yes.
And even white joy to some extent, they're doing some reclamation, maybe. It's very hot, and you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so when Dante, I've told Tracey this story. There's an author that we know, a friend we have in common, who bought me her book. When he came out with this book, I knew that I had wanted it, but I think part of the reason I had put off, because I usually pre-order, I had put off buying it, was because I thought, I can't access this right now. I was in such a depressed state and thought, this is not the time. I'm not going to be able to honor it. Like, I want to have fun when I read it. Like, I want to.
Yeah.
And then I think Dante knew, like, no, it's not that kind of book. So he
Right.
brought this out to me. And the reason I think it's such a gift is because you're pushing against that narrative of kind of this flippant Band-Aid on Black grief. Because what happened was, in the midst of George Floyd, we found a way to survive. We found that tether in Black joy. And what I experience, and my sense is that you experience, is people either diluting that emotional experience and making our stories all pain or all joy, and not leaving much room for nuance. It's either you want to consume, there are two kinds of people. You want to consume the grief to feel something because you're emotionally numb, or you want to consume Black joy because we know how to do it right, and white people are very disconnected from their own sense of joy, and you're diluted that way. And your book, I feel like, deals with that really beautifully. Anyways, getting back to your quote, never in my life before reading this did I think about joy in relationship to empathy and self-compassion, and how when that's absent, there's some kind of void created. So I want to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, that, first I'll say, I got that response from a lot of people. They were like, I can't read your book yet. I'm like, buy it though. Just buy it and put it on the shelf until you're ready, please, But yes, I got a lot of that. Or people who read like the first 5 chapters and threw it across the room was like, Tracey, I'm not ready, But I think, how I got to empathy and self-compassion was really just from my own personal excavation, right? Like I had a pastor that I was in talking to. I'd have meetings with him because I was kind of like a hard-headed parishioner. I had a lot of questions and that kind of thing. And so we would have these conversations and, butt heads on theology and like all of these things. But one day we were sitting in his office and he said, Tracey, you're not very kind to yourself. And at that time, I was writing a lot about Black joy and like all of this kind of thing. And I was disconnected, disembodied, you know, from the work, from what I was writing. And I realized when he said that was the piece, that my joy, this joy that I was, you know, flirting with and toying with, you know, being in relationship to, wasn't grounded in self-compassion and kindness and empathy for myself, right? And I realized, as you were saying, and I love how you kind of put that dichotomy, right? Like they either want to consume our grief or they want, you know, the spades games and the electric slide and the afro combs and all these animations of our joy, right? Without, you know, discussing, engaging with all the ways in which, you know, these two things live together. But when I was thinking about Black folks and how we talk about our joy and how we even can sometimes, I think, lean heavily on the cultural animations, right? I was thinking like, because and you write about this in your book so well, it's because we are afraid, and I think in a lot of ways, to go deeper, right? So it can be about the music or about the cultural animations, but it's not safe. It doesn't always feel safe to explore self-kindness and self-compassion because, you know, it's survival, right? We're surviving, and we're not afforded the opportunity to really show ourselves a kind of kindness. And I actually just reread your chapter on rest, right? And like rest was a foreign concept to me for so long, right? Rest and joy, actually. And so I think, I'm rambling, I'm going all over the place, but I think for me, empathy and self-compassion had to be the starting point. And I was able to now distinctively see the difference between the moments where I was happy, right? Like, oh, you know, I'm riding the roller coaster in Six Flags, and this is a happy moment. And when I was experiencing my great-grandmother's joy, right? Because joy, that kind of joy exists. It's the reason why enslaved people could still have joy in the midst of terrible circumstances, why people, it's an undercurrent that's always present. And that's because it's grounded in like what you call inherent dignity, right? Like this idea that dignity, you can't steal this. This joy I have, the world can't give it and the world can't take it away. You know, those songs are rooted in like inherent dignity and this idea of self-compassion and empathy and I am worthy and I am well, whether or not those people or this circumstance acknowledges that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, yeah.
So yeah, I think, you know, so much of, it's interesting because so much of that is also connected, I want to get back to the body, because it's connected to how self-compassion and empathy for this body of mine, this skin of mine, this body that fails me so often, it's been hard to try to embrace joy in the midst of how my body is seen and how I see my body and how those two things are also connected. You talk a lot about the body. Can you share a little bit about like the relationship, especially like body and joy and grief and place?
Yeah. Well, the portion that the bit that I read from my book is where I begin to talk about my health issues, and I'm a child realizing that something's up with my eyes, but at that point it's more of a beautiful thing. I think I have some kind of power or something, but later on in the book you find that I actually have a retinal condition, and what you probably don't know is Tracey also has a retinal condition. Is it okay that I share
that's
that?
fine, that's fine.
Also has a retinal condition, which is very unusual, and we both have lived in chronically ill and in bodies that have at times felt like strangers to us.
Very much.
So I want to say that
Yeah.
before I say that, because I think it's all kind of tangled up in each other. And I want to talk about that too, because when you said self-compassion is what joy takes, I think, like you said, compassion is so bodily, which reminds me that joy is so bodily. And when I first became sick, I was around 25, 26. I completely turned against my body. I completely kind of gave in to all of the self-hatred I'd been trained in as a Black woman, as a queer person. Like all of that indoctrination, I think it already existed in me, and it came awake in an entirely different way when all of a sudden I wasn't, getting out of bed on a daily basis, and I wasn't tying my own shoes, and so the need to kind of resist disembodiment, and maybe you experience this as well, the need to resist that became a little more urgent, a little more severe, when it was a matter of, Kofi, you don't actually listen to your body, you're going to end up in bed for another 7 days. If you don't eat, you're going to end up fainting or getting some strange rash or something like that. And so that season of life when I first became sick was so complicated, because I think for the first time I was almost being forced to pay attention to my body and dealing with immeasurable self-hatred as opposed to the compassion that my body deserved.
Yeah. I was the same way in 2019. Something happened, and I was basically bedridden for 6 to 8 months, and nobody could figure out what was going on with my body, and I felt so frustrated, but that's not even harsh. That's not hard enough of a word, right? Like I just felt I turned all my rage and anger into myself. And after some, of course, therapy, but also just getting still with myself, and I want to ask you this also, I realized that when I began to try to heal or get on the healing journey, like I said, and eat better and do all these things, there was a significant resistance. And I realized that I had become familiar and comfortable with my pain. I had almost said to myself that this is what I deserve. That in a weird way, it gave me control. Yeah. Because I could predict, okay, my legs are really hurting right now, or, I'm having difficulty keeping food down or whatever. I could predict and control, and that's my big issue, is control, right? And so in a way, I resisted healing. So it's ironic that the very next year I'm having to write about joy.
Yeah.
Because the act of accessing joy and allowing yourself and surrendering to joy is in direct opposition to this place I was in just a year earlier of not acceptance in a good way, but saying that this is what I deserve in my body. So I don't know if you experienced that kind of resistance, or resistance to the healing piece, or just resistance in general.
It's interesting that you say that. I don't think I've ever been asked this question. But I think, if I'm honest, I think on some level it's easier to not hope. It feels like lesser risk. And so, people, usually Christians, well-meaning Christians, love to lay hands and pray for me, and it's all very sweet. But the reality is, I don't have much hope of being in a completely able body anymore, and I'm almost afraid to hope. And I think there's definitely been periods where I was afraid to hope for anything different, because it's easier to just grieve once and try to, put it behind me, for lack of a better phrase. But yeah, it's easier to grieve once than have to keep keep grieving and realizing that hope isn't happening. And so I do think I felt that resistance, for better and worse. There's something good to like being able to really encounter your body for what it is, and something terrible at being so afraid to approach hope for anything better, because you don't want to be disappointed and you're so tired of grieving,
Yeah.
you know.
That hope piece is key, and I think even as Black people and Black, you know, we're taught that hope is the thing that has kept our people surviving and going and resisting and, you know, bouncing back and still being here in the midst of it all. And when you talk about like personally, when hope dies or when hope goes away, I think maybe sometimes you feel like you're portraying your, at least I do, feel like I'm portraying my ancestors.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because my ancestors, I mean, so, you know, you have this thing where you know, have to rest every, you know, other day. Like, you know, you have to do an event and then spend 2 days recovering from that event, you know. You know, but if you were, I don't know, Zora Neale Hurston, you could go for, you know, 7 days or whatever, like this notion that I have. And I actually, I think, kind of got over that because I realized that our ancestors are like, no, you got it wrong. I did that so you don't have to. Like, it's not like, you don't have to accept what I accept. I gave you access. Now you can just go heal, or you can just accept, or whatever it looks like for you. But I do think I still get those moments where if I'm not pushing and I'm not striving, and if I'm not, then somehow I'm letting my people down,
I
as
do
if it
feel
all
that.
lands on me.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel that way. And some of it is probably merited and some of it's not. It's very complicated. I think hope is just so costly. And my whole life, I heard about hope as this saving force, you know, like you're saying. But for reality, it's actually a very costly practice to engage. To hope in something, like, sets you up for the potential to grieve when it doesn't happen. It's, and I think the more honest we are about that, the better. But at the same time, I do acknowledge people have asked, why isn't hope a chapter in your book? I'm like so surprised people have asked that, because I never actually considered it. And they'll say, you know, like, is it because it undergirds everything? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Or it's because it's so deeply painful to hope.
Right.
And I can be very emotionally lazy in terms of putting myself in a position. And so there is a kind of laziness, fatigue in me in terms of like hoping. Maybe a similar fatigue that the psalmist feels. I think about Psalm 42, and he's like, why are you downcast, O my soul? I hope in God. And I'm like, aren't you tired?
Yeah.
You know, aren't you? And so I don't tend to talk much about hope, because I don't think I'm a good apologist for it.
Yeah.
But I hope 10 years from now I will be.
Yeah.
That I'll be less afraid to engage it and more willing to tell kind of the next generation. You actually don't have to bear the dream all by yourself. Like, you don't have to dream for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That exhaustion is real. That fatigue is real. And I think in 2023, I think we're seeing a lot of that. I think we're seeing people are just tired. Black folks are tired, you know. And this notion of keeping going, you know. And that's the reason when I talk about Black joy, I think I talk about it like Black joy exists regardless, right? Our joy is not you know, we hear, there was Black joy is resistance. That was the catchphrase. Black joy is resistant. And I wore the shirts and I was there. But like, it can't just be resistance, because if it's just in resistance, then it's still in relationship to whiteness. It's still in relationship to what's happening, right? It's still in relationship to the gays, right? Like, I'm going to, dance at this protest and sing because
of you,
right?
yes, yes.
And I understood that there was a restoration, there was a healing component to it that existed. This is the way my great-grandmother healed herself, right? So it had nothing to do with anybody else. It was like, I am hurting, so you know what? In this church service, I'm going to rock, right? I'm going to clap, I'm going to cry out, I'm going to call back and call in response with this person who's speaking to me. I'm going to do all of these things because it is soothing my central nervous system, although she didn't say that, right? She didn't know that, but like, I know that now, right? This is soothing my central nervous system. And so our joy exists, differently, or outside of whatever is going on. Yes, time.
I think we're going to transition to Q&A soon, but as I know there are less of us, and asking a question might be a little more scary in this setting. I hope you still ask questions. As you think of them, I'll ask you a kind of fun question. Okay. Because we're both writers, but you are a writer, 22 books writer, and I have Black Joy here. She's holding Then They Came for Mine. These were published in the same year. She published two acclaimed books in the same year, which is unheard of. I don't get it. Couldn't be me. But
that lack of rest that I just finished talking about.
But tell me something about embodied writing and how because you talk in one of these books, you talk about kind of this practice of breathing in between paragraphs, and I find that really beautiful. So maybe you can just say a little bit about that while people think of their questions.
Yeah. I realized I did, I don't even remember which book I wrote it in, but I realized that when I was writing, or when I would write, that I wouldn't breathe. So I'd write and I'd literally be holding my breath. And so I would wonder why after I'd finish a writing session or whatever, I'd like have a headache, or I'd have to lay down. And I was actually doing some breath work exercises and, yoga and all of this. And that's when I became like bodily aware of what my body was doing as I was writing. And so I would write a sentence, then take a deep breath, and write a sentence, take a deep breath. Now, that kind of interrupted my flow. So now I am better at breathing deeply throughout the process, to the point where I don't have to actually be consciously doing it. But that is a sticky question for me, because I'm still a work in progress. I still am so messy when it comes to writing. When I was teaching as a professor, I was the write every day, and and if you write 15 minutes a day, you have a book by the end of the year. And like Black Joy, even though I'd written a lot of things prior to that, Black Joy was the first time where I liberated myself from everything and from all the rules. And I did very much focus on my body's rhythms. And there's a rhythm that I don't even know if I have the words for that works best when I'm in my creative space, right? And I mean, I'm sure you probably have that too, like this feeling in my body where it's like, oh, I should write now because I have that feeling. But when you're working under deadline, they don't care about your feeling. And so it gets messy because I'm balancing, as a ghostwriter, a project that I'm writing in somebody else's voice, right? And then my own stuff, and then all of these deadlines and everything. So I don't really know if I answered your question, but I just think that I am learning as I go. I'm learning how to breathe when I write. I'm learning how to, I bought one of those little treadmill thingies.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of cool, like, because I'm realizing there's something connected to movement for me movement in writing. So my desk pops up so I can stand, and then there's like this treadmill. I'm really excited about this, can't you tell? There's like this really treadmill thing, and then I can walk on it as I'm writing.
I'm looking at you because I'm jealous because I have one and
You don't use it?
No, absolutely not. I had this dream, and so I'm jealous because you're living my dream. But I quite literally, I'm writing horizontal in bed.
I'm not mad at that at all. If I could do that, and I like wake up in the middle of the night and type stuff in my phone, but if I could write whole books in my bed, I totally would do that. No, the movement, I think there's something, and I haven't really kind of put my finger on it, but there's something with movement
I love that.
and creativity that is happening for me. And because I still struggle in my body with like extreme exercise, I can't really do a lot for a long time. Just turning that thing on for like 10 minutes, you know, I'm gonna get 500 words out of it, you know, so. And also I use things that are accessible. So I use dictation, you know, you know, I'm thankful for the technology that's available that helps me when my fingers don't want to work, you know. So there's that.
Yeah.
What about you? I'm curious about you said you lay in the bed, but I can't imagine that this here
Tracey,
flesh was written.
Listen, so in this here flesh, I'm like, oh, I'm writing this under an oak tree, which I was, the introduction and first section.
Right.
But after that, it was in bed. And pretty much all of my writing, Penguin Random House, they were like, send a photo. They do this thing, this feature authors, and you're supposed to send a photo of your like where you write, your desk. And I was like, I could do the honest thing, or I take a picture of this really nice oak desk that I bought myself. I took a picture of the bed because that is truly where I write. And I just finished my second book, which I just announced today, which is Black Liturgies. And it's a kind of, it was written in the dark, you know, it's kind of a 3 a.m. writing, laying down, bag of Cheetos by my head, grapes here, I know where everything is. And I finished.
Hey.
I don't necessarily think it's the healthiest. I'm inspired, and I want to, you know, involve my body more. There are little ways that I've done. I mean, I have to write by hand. I don't have to, but I write by hand.
You longhand.
And
Wow.
I don't want to, but my eyes are very light sensitive. So halfway through this year flesh, I transitioned to writing it out, and then I would either have my husband transcribe it or I would do it later. And so that's a beautiful practice. But I also have realized that I don't really write a movement unless I do that movement on some level. Like if I'm writing about my grandma ripping leaves, I'm going to do that motion, and I think it gives me a more interesting way to think about what it means to rip leaves, if that makes sense.
I love that.
So I do that, but yeah,
That's
I'm not
awesome.
quite at the level of being able to walk and write at the same time, but that was absolutely the dream. I bought this
Listen,
$200
this just
walking
started.
pad, and
So ask me in 6 months whether or not that thing is over in the corner somewhere, because I'm over it now. That's another thing, my attention is short. So like I'll be on this thing for like 6 months and then it just goes away and I'll go back to my desk. But I love that you longhand. I find something, when I do write longhand, I did Black Joy, some longhand, some on the computer, most on the computer. But there was something that shifted in my brain, and that's interesting. I love that so much. I just need you guys to know that Black Liturgies got me through. I said this to her when she came in, got me through, and continues to get me through the pandemic and 2020 and 2021 in particular. I'm so grateful for Cole's just insight, and I feel like, and I don't know how you feel about this word, but I feel like your prophetic gift. There's something prophetic there, and just the way you wield story and prayer and I consider myself a contemplative, so I connect with the silence between the words, and that just, it is so incredible. So when I saw the announcement today, I was like, yo, I'm about to pre-order. I'm about that Black Liturgy's life. So
Thank you.
congratulations on that. January 2024.
Thank you. Okay. And are there questions among us?
Anyone have questions? I have a question. No, I will start. I'll start us, but I hope this inspires your questions. I realize that, one of the things that both of you are very willing to engage is God at work somehow in your experience and the world around you. And here we are in a church, and I thought, well, I'll start the questions with just asking you about how God fits into a lot of the conversation you've just had. I told Cole that her book that I have is like full of underlining and stars and notes in the margins, but I also have some underlining and stars in your book, Black Joy, Tracey. And one of the things that I was so grateful for, it's just in the introduction, but you say, if I never believed in the interconnected nature of our bodies and spirits before, there is no way I could have embarked on, much less finish any piece that you'll read here. And you talk about the Holy Spirit at work in your life. Cole, for me, you're the God you share is hurting a lot, but also very real, and I feel like you're unapologetic, and I want to ask you to break that open a little bit if you. So, however you want to do that.
You go first.
Me? So I guess the question is like, what is my spiritual or God? What is God to me? I guess, or something to that. It's interesting. I grew up in a Black Baptist church in Louisville, Kentucky. And so my foundation is this very traditional Black Protestant, Baptist experience with a dab of Pentecostal. I am a survivor of sexual trauma, and at a certain point in my childhood, I was sent away. And I was sent away into a family member who was very apostolic Pentecostal, and it was an entirely different experience, religious experience, than what I had grown up with, which was less animated. And so my first understandings of God were very rooted in a religious experience, right? A religious background. And it took another 30 years for me to begin to see some shifting in my faith. And I'm probably still in the midst of it, which is the reason why I'm like grasping for words here. But some shifting, some reorganizing. I still have a little of that Black Baptist Kentucky girl in me, but her eyes have been opened up to the ways in which my faith, Christianity in general, has been wielded against people. And the perversion of it, right? The perversion of the love that Christ taught and lived. And so I began reading, Thomas Keating and, all of these people, and then Howard Thurman, like I began to explore Christian contemplation and centering prayer, and I realized that, there was this stillness or this contemplative way that was very different from my upbringing that I was very drawn to, but the people that I was reading, at least at first, didn't look like me. And so then I began to read, like I said, Howard Thurman and Barbara Holmes and all of these people that told me that there was a way to be contemplative and Black at the same time. And so I say all that to say that I just had this really interesting winding journey when it comes to my faith. I wouldn't call it deconstruction, because I know that's like that's the buzzword now. I would probably say there's part reclamation, part, deconstruction probably is the best word, but deconstruction with an eye on reconstruction, right? Like I think that there is something that I've reclaimed that was always there, even from when I was a little girl, singing. I think I write about this, singing in the grocery basket, the grocery store, singing at the top of my lungs at 3 years old, Jesus loves me, right? And not really understanding what that word means, but in my core understanding it, like there's something that I connected to with that. And so it's just been a winding journey. My faith journey has been winding. But I've been drawn to stillness. I've been drawn to the contemplative, and it fits very well with my storytelling. So, yeah.
I was not raised in a religious home. We didn't grow up going to church. My grandma, who raised my father, who raised me, my grandma was the victim of a lot of trauma that was facilitated by a church, and so she didn't necessarily raise my father, going to church regularly, and she talks about her anger at God, tethering her to God, which I think is really beautiful. So she wasn't attending a church, but at the end of her life talked a lot to me about how she never really abandoned the idea of God and a Christian faith, which I think is really complicated and beautiful. But I didn't grow up thinking about God much at all, or Jesus or anything like that. I think if my house had a spirituality, it looked more like storytelling and myth. We are big on making up stories and telling them to our children. And humor, I think, was a big part, and love of the Black body. I think if I had rituals that were spiritual, I think they were around the body. My dad greasing my sister and I's scalps in the morning and telling us, you look good, you feel good, and kind of licking our eyebrows. And so I think all of that was kind of the spirituality I was born into. And then there was a strange period of time where all of us went to this all-white Baptist church with my great-aunt Kathy, but it really wasn't until college that I began to explore it for myself, a Christian tradition. And it was complicated because I was exploring it in the context of whiteness and trying to kind of find my way. I really resonated with a lot of white contemplatives first. Merton and Allen and Julian of Norwich, and found so much beauty and nuance in their writing, and it was kind of encountering that alongside college in general, which was like a whole new world. In the classroom, I was reading Toni Morrison for the first time, all these Black authors. I'd never read Alice Walker, I'd never read Zora Neale Hurston, never read Toni Morrison, Richard Wright. I don't know what I was doing in high school, but I was being confronted with Black literature, specifically Black fiction, for the first time seriously in college. And the Black novel, the tradition of the Black novel is just laced with spirituality, and including a Christian spirituality. It's inescapable. And so it kind of was a way for me to realize, oh, this is for me too. Like, I don't have to, abandon where I come from to engage the mystical. And I think I've always been a bit of a mystic before I had language for it.
Yes.
So I found a home in mysticism and even Christian mysticism through Black literature, I think. And yeah, here I am. I try to be transparent that I'm writing out of a Christian tradition and also a spiritual tradition of my family growing up. You know, that's why there's a bunch of weird myths and this here flesh that people kind of scratch their heads at, and I try to include all of it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was definitely your conversation in the introduction with Baby Suggs and Beloved, and like I was like, yes, that's it.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you so much. It's been really a delight to hear you both speak. And it's so clear to me, like, how much and how much depth and intricacy, like, you have to say about so many things. And my question is, like, in the writing process, in the like communicating to a wider audience process, and even probably the marketing, like, what, if there's one, is like the hardest decision you've had to make in that process of kind of like compiling the words that you're choosing to share, if there was like and how did you handle kind of that decision?
I'll give a general answer. I want to give a specific answer, but I can't think of one. Maybe a specific instance will come to me. But I have learned that I use very strange language, or I use language strangely, which I'm okay with, you know? Like, I'm like, let's do it. Let's see if the reader knows what the heck I'm talking about. Let's take them on a ride. My editor is like, Cole, what? So I think the hardest moments are when I want to say something with such a degree of nuance that it actually becomes lost a bit, because I'm trying to find a word that's so either the perfect and most precise word, or if it can't be precise, I want it to be weird. I want it to be the straight, like a completely strange way to say something. So if it's not precise, at least it's interesting. I've tried to make this case. Can you tell I've made this case to someone before? And I said, if it can't be precise, which it can't be, I'm just going to make it weird. And so I've had to kind of learn when to stand on the kind of queerness of a word or a phrase, and when to allow something to be simple and straightforward, and that's difficult for me.
Yeah. I don't like to be told what to do. So I'm working on it. But
Sorry, I think your necklace, if you unhook your necklace from your mic,
oh, it's connecting.
I think there's a little,
that feedback. I see what you
yeah.
mean. Yeah. So I think the hardest part for me was just, I spent the early part of my career as an editor and as an independent publisher, and so I was making the decisions. And so Black Joy wasn't my first traditionally published book, but it was the first that had a lot of of the machine, I guess, behind it. Big 3 to 5, 6 publisher, whatever, I don't know what the number is, but you know, and so in that process, I had to learn when to listen and when to advocate for myself. And that was a delicate balance, because my instinct is to advocate all the time and to demand, you know, and I really had to really listen. Fortunately, I had an amazing editor who let me do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in the book. But I think the hardest part was just internally me accepting that there may be a different way to say a thing, or a different, or that I needed. My biggest issue was she would say, well, tell me more about this, and I'm like, there's nothing else to say. Like I told you the story, And so, can you flesh this out? No. so really getting to that, I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind. It was just navigating, having been independent or an editor myself for so long, having to surrender to the process. I don't think I've ever said that to anybody either. So.
Thank you. This is for Tracey. I think I heard you say that you do ghostwriting sometimes?
Yes.
Doesn't that impose a lot of discipline and trying to, sort of a follow-up to the last question, that requires putting yourself in another person's perspective and everything else, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because in my ghostwriting, I know what I'm getting paid to do, right? I know that I am writing in this person's voice. This is not my story. This is not, it's not for me to protect anything. I am listening to these individuals tell me their story, and I am translating that in their voice on the page. And so for me, I guess I compartmentalize it. I feel like it's very different in that I am truly a stand-in for this person, and I'm writing in their voice, so whatever they need to say, they're going to say it. I can't necessarily turn off my editorial hat, but I try to use it for the advantage of the book. As opposed to when I'm very, it's my baby, as opposed to somebody else's child, ultimately, right? So I think I'm just a little bit more protective, and I've been in and around publishing for almost 2 decades now, and I've just seen a lot, and that might have me a little jaded, and so I go in with guns blazing when it comes to my own work, because I'm not going to let you do me wrong, where I don't necessarily have that kind of power or say when I'm ghostwriting. They've hired me, to write this book for this person. I am listening to story after story, interviewing, following them, traveling with them, learning their voice, learning their cadence, but I ultimately don't have any say over I'm working with the editor for this person, as opposed to it being my baby and you're telling me that, you don't like the dress it has on, right? So I think, I don't know, I just feel like I put them in 2 separate boxes.
Cole, I was just wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about how your development of Black liturgies, what it is, and how you came to it, and also I find it very compelling that not having come from a traditional religious, coming to create a quote unquote liturgy, but not having been in a traditional raised that way, and how that informed it.
Yeah. I began Black liturgies in the summer of 2020. So a lot was happening, including the pandemic. You're okay. Including the pandemic, including just the world contending with a lot of the same Black grief that Black people have been contending with before people began to film it. And then we also had a president that was just stoking all kinds of racial divisions along kind of religious fault lines. And I'd logged on to this Episcopal church service the Sunday after the video of George Floyd's murder went viral. And I remember being in bed, lying in bed and thinking, this is just not gonna be for me. However hard they try, whatever kind of creativity they put in this, there are just days when it's hard to pray words written by a white man. And those same words that in other seasons of life had completely held me together at the seams, the Book of Common Prayer has been such a stabilizing force in my life. That summer I knew wasn't going to be sufficient. And how I decided to write myself into that. I think I've written I've written more than I've spoken probably in my lifetime. I was a very quiet child, and writing was kind of my first way of dealing with grief and really just expressing myself to the world. So I think in the kind of the immediacy of that trauma, I went back to that, and I think if there was anything I was going to do to contribute anything that summer, it was going to be written. And thankfully I'd encountered liturgy at that point and thought, okay, maybe there are some other Black people who are feeling this way, who kind of connect to the rest of liturgy, because it is a kind of rest. It's where you don't have to do so much. You can just come and experience it. And the project has grown much further than that, thankfully. And now there's going to be a book, which is very exciting. But I'm biased because I am a liturgist, but I think it's such a beautiful practice of solidarity, both the writing of it, if that's your thing, but also the experience of it, to kind of stay in the words. What does it mean to kind of commit yourself to the words even when they're not for you, to stay in the room when a phrase doesn't necessarily resonate or doesn't necessarily make sense for you? I think it's kind of something mysterious, some kind of mysterious act of solidarity happens in communal liturgy. I hope I'm creating some kind of that. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I mean, I don't attend church much these days, but I attended a service at Duke, and I got to hear these Duke students put together this service using Black liturgies as the framework, and I couldn't believe it. I was weeping throughout. Because of the pandemic, I really haven't been in many public indoor spaces. I've had to be very selective. So, but it's been special to see it be used in that way. Yeah.
I wonder if Black Liturgies, the book, will become the Book of Common Prayer for Black folks, you know, seriously.
Did you want to also answer the question, or?
Yeah, it was for Paul, yeah.
This is on, right? Yeah. So I'm still sort of forming the question, and it's sort of adding on to what Joel has already asked, but the way you both speak about trauma and having a therapist and working with your body, embodied writing, embodiment in general, and, you know, practicing faith in an embodied way. It's so touching and so beautiful, and really such, for many of us, a new chapter, a new way of living. We're all coming to understand trauma in a new way and sort of re-seeing all of our traditions and how we interact and how we do things. Do you have any wishes or wild-haired ideas or anything for Christian practices or just public gatherings in general around being more embodied and being more in faith in an embodied way? Any wish or crazy idea or anything?
Well, I'll say that I do think Episcopal in Catholic, you know, Anglo-Catholic church services have something right about in embodiment. The first Episcopal service, I joke about this all the time, the first Episcopal service I went to, I was like so exhausted. It was like we're standing and we're sitting and we're kneeling and we're turning to face and we're smelling things, and I was like, this is just a lot. You know, I was used to just kind of sitting there, and you know, I would even sit for songs in the church I had attended previously, just kind of sitting, listening, and then walking out. And when I attended an Episcopal church service for the first time, I knew that my resistance to it was because I was needing it. I was needing a kind of attunement to my body, and I had grown so kind of disconnected and numb. And I'm like, oh, I have to pay attention to the fact that I don't know how long I can kneel before I start to become shaky. And so even just recognizing my own limits in a, you know, liturgical service has been beautiful. So I think a lot is being done right if you if you are used to it and born into it, I think you can kind of forget how embodied the Episcopal liturgy is and the Catholic liturgy is. But yeah, I kind of trust other people to dream up new things as well. There's this wonderful prophet, sage, Trisha Hersey. We call her the Nap Bishop. She created a organization called the Nap Ministry, which is found on Instagram, and her whole message is rest. She has a theological background, a performing arts background. She's just brilliant in many ways. I highly recommend her book, Rest is Resistance. But she does these like really strange and beautiful performing art things around rest, and she has this chapel space now, and people will just come to sleep. And she'll have someone play the harp or play some music, maybe speak some words, and it's like so simple and so beautiful and tender that doesn't need to have all of these bells and whistles sometimes. I don't know, but I think it takes this is a different way to answer your question, but I think it takes a lot of courage to dream like Trisha Hersey dreams, to think like, I'm going to propose something really strange that meets our desire for embodied activity, but it's gonna sound weird. And so really, I think we need to cultivate weird children who are okay dreaming up these things for us, because I think they will if we listen.
For sure. I think I have one of those weird children who will do that. She's probably watching. I love Trisha Hersey. She just did something in New York where it was performing arts, where basically people would come in and watch her sleep. Like watch her rest.
It was like an exhibit.
But I can imagine that being a transfer, something really mysterious and mystical happen when you're literally watching a black woman, and I think that's her point, right? Like it's rooted in this idea of her rest in spite of, right? Despite of what's going on in the world. And her being a black woman and just sleeping and resting and napping. I love her work so much, so I'm right there with you. I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of things that I'm dreaming up, but one thing that I actually do intend on implementing is I would love to create an adult play space. And what I mean by that, not like a Dave & Buster's, not a place but like where there are literal adult swings, adult slides, like a literal playground. Because I feel like one of the things I write about is about how I love to swing, and I was able to find joy in going with my daughter to the playground and getting on the swings like I was like 10 or 11 and swinging. And now we do it regularly, and I'm like, 2 pushes to my husband. Like, I'm like, 2 pushes, babe, 2 pushes. Or like, he comes and he pushes me, and I just giggle like I'm 10. And I can't stop it, it's uncontrollable, but I wonder what it would look like if, definitely from an embodiment standpoint, but just from a joy, an embracing of joy, if there was this like playground for adults, you know what I'm saying? And I know it probably exists somewhere, but I definitely would love to do something like that, where we can just get back into our bodies and really kind of do some kind of like embodied conversation with our inner child, because I think there's something there. Nobody take my idea.
I was gonna say, don't give away that out. This is being live streamed. You don't know. Don't give it away for free.
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Carlos. Although I do want to say my idea, inspired by your ideas, to just bring a disco ball down in the middle of the church and lower the lights and turn up the music. But anyway, so don't count on that happening immediately, friends. I was thankful before this started, and now I'm beyond thankful. I do feel like you said it, I think, Tracey, that your writing was in dialogue already, and then here you are sitting in dialogue with one another, and it was beautiful to listen to and to feel engaged in, and not at all like we were voyeurs, but just really that we were invited to be part of it. It really is a blessing, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. Could we thank these good people for their beautiful... Before we conclude, I asked my colleague, Mother Leandra Lambert, to welcome you, and so Leandra, if you wouldn't mind, to welcome you to part 2 of our meeting, or our event. Yes? Oh yeah, after you did that, I was going to finish. But let me finish, and I'll let Leandra have the last word. So, there were books for sale in the narthex. We can bring them to the parish hall, where there are a lot of cookies, because we were counting on lots of people. So please come and eat a cookie or two. And there's some water to wash it down with. But these folks will be able to sign books, and we have some more books for sale if you weren't able to buy one. So all that will happen in the parish hall right after this. So you're all welcome. And thank you for being here. Leandra.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to our 2 guests. You have fed us spiritually this evening, and it has really been a joy to meet you in person and to really listen in as the 2 of you engage one another in conversation. So thank you again. To those of you who are in the house, those of you who are joining us by live stream, we are so glad that you are here. The festivities don't end tonight. You are invited to Grace Church tomorrow. That's at 254 Hicks Street, where the Reverend Adrian Thorne, who is the senior minister at Riverside Church, will be in conversation again with Cole Arthur Riley. And the conversation is going to focus on her text, This Here Flesh. So we'll get to really dig deep into some of the stories that you referenced this evening. Thank you all again so much for being here. And yes, we begin at 12 noon, so we look forward to seeing you, 254 Hicks Street, right down the road.
Thank you, my friend.